Welcome to Hollywood Graveyard. Today, we conclude our tour filmed by you, the Hollywood Graveyard community, visiting famous and historical graves in your neck of the woods. Together we'll cross the country and the oceans to pay our respects to legends around the globe, like Lucille Ball, Mary Tyler Moore, Rick James, and many more. My friends, the time is yours. Part 6 of our viewer's special, if you can believe it. When we set out on this journey together a few months back, I figured we'd cover 2, maybe 3 videos. Yet here we are at the end of our journey with 6 under our belt. Pretty long ones at that. You guys are amazing. This final leg of our tour will find us bouncing around the states a bit more before landing right back home in Southern California. If you haven't watched them already, parts 1 through 5 are up for your viewing pleasure. We begin today down south in Georgia, one of Hollywood's favorite places to film movies and TV outside of California. And with these beautiful azaleas in bloom, who can blame them? We're in historic Bonaventure Cemetery in Savannah. And en route to our first famous grave, we find a curiosity of old graveyards. Before the modern age of science and medicine, people didn't have as many concrete ways to be sure the dead were actually dead. Fear of being buried alive was very real. Even Poe wrote about it in his short story, The Premature Burial. So to alleviate these fears, a means of detecting premature burial was devised, sometimes called a safety coffin or dead ringer bell. A rope would be attached to the wrist of the deceased. The rope then funneled up a pipe to the surface and attached to a bell. Should someone find themselves hastily entombed, all they need do is move their arm to ring the bell and to notify those on the surface that they're still alive. So on your next cemetery stroll, keep an ear out for the faint ting of a bell. Someone beneath you may not actually be dead. Let's proceed on to Section H. Here is legendary songwriter Johnny Mercer. As a songwriter, he primarily wrote lyrics with composers ranging from Hoagy Carmichael to Henry Mancini. Among the most popular songs he wrote lyrics for include Moon River, Days of Wine and Roses,
Days of Wine and Roses,
and Hooray for Hollywood.
Hooray for Hollywood, that's gooey bally hooly Hollywood.
He also wrote music for his own songs, including Something's Gotta Give. Over the span of his career, he wrote lyrics for an estimated 1,500 songs for movies and Broadway shows, receiving 19 Oscar nominations, winning 4. He was also highly regarded as a singer, performing many of his own songs. Mercer died of a brain tumor at the age of 66. Northview Cemetery is in Cedartown, Georgia. Here we find the grave of Jan Hooks. She was one of TV's funny ladies, remembered as a member of the cast of Saturday Night Live from 1986 to 1994. After SNL, she had a regular role on Designing Women and recurring roles on TV comedies like Third Rock from the Sun and 30 Rock. This bottle of salsa placed on her grave is a reference to a salsa ad she did in the 80s. Jan died of cancer at the age of 57. To Atlanta now and Oakland Cemetery. On these grounds, we find one of Georgia's most noted writers, Margaret Mitchell. It was her book that would give Hollywood one of its biggest films ever, Gone with the Wind. The Civil War-era novel took her 10 years to write and was published in 1936. It would not only become a bestseller, but won Mitchell the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. Just 1 month after publication, the film rights for the book were sold to David O. Selznick for a then-record $50,000. The 1939 film would win 8 Oscars and become an enduring Hollywood treasure. Coca-Cola is one of Georgia's most famous products. At Westview Cemetery here in Atlanta, we find not the man who invented it, but the man who brought it to the masses, Asa Candler. Coca-Cola was created by pharmacist John Pemberton in 1886. The Coca-Cola formula was purchased by Asa Candler in 1889 for $2,300, and he then incorporated the Coca-Cola Company in 1892. Coca-Cola has since become one of the biggest, most recognized brands in the world. Here in Lithonia, Georgia, is Hillendale Cemetery. This is where we find the final resting place of Lisa Left Eye Lopes, the L in TLC. The R&B group formed right here in Georgia in 1990, with Left Eye not only singing and rapping, but also co-writing many of their songs, including one of their biggest hits, Waterfalls.
Don't go chasing waterfalls. Please stick to the river.
Lopes won 4 Grammys with the group, but in April 2002, while conducting charity work down in Honduras, she was killed in a car crash at the age of 30. She was filming a documentary about her spiritual retreat to Honduras at the time. It would be titled The Last Days of Left Eye. We've covered New York a few times, but there's always more to see here. We're in Rochester now and Mount Hope Cemetery. Here we find the grave of abolitionist Frederick Douglass. After escaping slavery, Douglass became a national leader of the abolitionist movement, which fought to end slavery in America. He became well regarded as an intellectual through his oratory and writings opposing slavery, a living counterexample to slaveholders' arguments that slaves were intellectually inferior. His 1845 autobiography would be a bestseller, promoting the cause of abolition. Douglass was a firm believer in equality for all peoples, black, white, male, female, native, or immigrant. He died of a heart attack at the age of 77. Not far from here is another social reformer, Susan B. Anthony. She is perhaps America's most famous suffragette, a leading force behind the movement which fought to give women the right to vote. But her fight for equality went beyond that, also joining efforts at the time to end slavery and grant equal rights to African Americans. In 1872, Susan B. Anthony was arrested for voting in her hometown of Rochester, New York. The trial became widely publicized, and her conviction would only fuel the suffrage movement. But change comes slowly, and it would be another nearly 4 decades before the 19th Amendment would grant women the right to vote in 1920, 14 years after Susan's death. Watching films wouldn't be possible without, well, film. Here on the grounds of Eastman Kodak, the company he founded is George Eastman. He was an inventor and entrepreneur who revolutionized photography by putting the first simple camera into the hands of everyday people. In 1884, Eastman patented the first practical film roll, which would allow for the release of the Kodak Black camera in 1888, the camera from which all handheld film-based cameras would evolve. Eastman also innovated film that would be used for motion picture cameras used by the world's earliest filmmakers, from Maybridge to Edison and the Lumiere brothers. In 1932, at the age of 77, Eastman shot himself in the heart, leaving a note which read, "To my friends, my work is done. Why wait?" Jamestown is near the western edge of New York State. This is Lakeview Cemetery. Here's the final resting place of B.F. Goodrich. Benjamin Goodrich began making rubber products in the 1860s, most notably tires. He was the founder of the B.F. Goodrich Company, one of the leading tire manufacturers. Also here at Lakeview, we find one of television's greatest legends, the queen of TV comedy, Lucille Ball. She began appearing in minor film roles in the 30s and 40s. During that time, she met and married Desi Arnaz. In 1951, she and Arnaz created their own sitcom, I Love Lucy, which would become one of the most popular and beloved sitcoms in television history, and would innovate how TV comedies were made.
In this short 3 months that we've been out here, Lucy has become a Hollywood legend.
Me, a Hollywood legend?
Yes, that's right. When I'm out in the street, people point me out and say, "There he goes. That's the fellow that's married to that red-headed screwball."
The show ran for 6 seasons until 1957. Desi and Lucy formed their own production company to produce the show, Desilu Productions. In 1962, Ball became the first woman to run a major television studio when she took over production there, the studio known for producing other shows like Star Trek and Mission Impossible. Ball followed I Love Lucy with shows like The Lucy Show and Here's Lucy, performing on television into the 80s. In 1989, at the age of 77, Lucille Ball died from an aortic aneurysm. After her death, she was cremated and originally inurned in a niche in the columbarium of the Radiant Dawn at Forest Lawn, Hollywood. In 2002, her family had her remains moved here to her hometown. Portland, New York is north of here. At Portland Evergreen Cemetery, we find the grave of Brad Anderson. He was a cartoonist, known as the creator of the comic strip Marmaduke. He created the comic strip, which features a lovable Great Dane and his family, the Winslows. The strip would be syndicated in around 600 papers nationwide, and he continued to draw Marmaduke until his death at the age of 91 in 2015. Continuing north, we reach Buffalo. This is Forest Lawn Cemetery, where we find the grave of Kristen Pfaff. She was a rock musician who played bass for the band Hole from 1993 to 1994. She also played in the band Janitor Joe. In 1994, she was found dead of a drug overdose at the age of 27, just 2 months after her close friend, Kurt Cobain, died. Also here is another legendary musician, Rick James. He was a Grammy Award-winning singer and songwriter who found success in the 70s and 80s. His hits include You and I, Mary Jane, and James's signature song, Super Freak.
She's a super freak, she's super freaking out.
In 1990, MC Hammer sampled the song for his hit, You Can't Touch This. In 2004, James returned to the spotlight through an appearance on Chappelle's Show. Later that year, James was found dead from pulmonary and cardiac failure. He was 56. Let's head into the mausoleum here at Forest Lawn. Here's the crypt of Shirley Chisholm. She was the first black woman elected to the United States Congress, serving in New York. In 1972, she also became the first black candidate for a major party's nomination for President of the United States. She was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. This is Oakwood Cemetery in Troy, New York. Here we find a man who has come to symbolize the U.S. itself, Sam Wilson, known as Uncle Sam. Wilson was a meat packer who supplied the United States Army with meat during the War of 1812. He stamped his meat shipments with the initials U.S. for United States, but soldiers began referring to them as from Uncle Sam. Thus the moniker came to signify the U.S. federal government. Over to the west coast and Portland, Oregon, we reach Riverview Cemetery, the final resting place of Virgil Earp. He was a U.S. Marshal in Tombstone, Arizona, and the brother of Wyatt and Morgan Earp. They are famous for a confrontation with outlaws at the OK Corral in 1881. The shootout left the outlaws dead. Earp died in Nevada at the age of 62 and was buried here at his daughter's request. Tombstone, Arizona has become famous in Western lore, and so too has the graveyard that hosts many of these rugged lawmen and outlaws. Boothill Graveyard, so named because many of those who are buried here were gunfighters who died with their boots on. This includes the men who died at the OK Corral shootout. Billy Clanton and the McClary brothers were killed during the gunfight with the Earps and Doc Holliday in 1881. There's something distinctively beautiful about these desert graveyards. No carpets of green grass, just earth and rock to blanket the dead. This is Jesus Nazareno Cemetery in New Mexico, where Dennis Hopper is buried. He was an actor, perhaps best known today for his role in the 1969 film Easy Rider, a film he also co-wrote and directed. The film captured the lost idealism and counterculture of the 60s, and earned him an Oscar nomination. He was also nominated for his role in the 1986 film Hoosiers, and he played mean villains in films like Speed and Waterworld. He died from cancer in 2010 at the age of 74. Calvary Cemetery is in Sioux City, Iowa. Here is the grave of Tommy Bolin. He was a guitar player and songwriter who played in a number of notable bands in the 60s and 70s, including Zephyr, James Gang, and Deep Purple, who he played with until they disbanded in 1976. He also did some solo work in the months that followed, but by August of that year, he would be dead. Another talented artist taken by drugs. He was 25. Our next state is also the name of the character we're visiting. This is Westview Community Cemetery in Pompano Beach, Florida, a cemetery founded for African American burials, as at the time, they weren't allowed to be buried in white cemeteries. And here on these grounds, we find the actress who played Florida, Esther Rolle. She was a gifted television comedian who originated the role of Florida on the 70s sitcom Maude. After 2 seasons, the character was spun off into her own sitcom, Good Times, which ran until 1979.
Florida Evans, you got it made in the shade, Miss TV star.
Oh, that'll be the day when they have Florida Evans on television.
It was television's first African-American 2-parent family sitcom. The role earned Esther a Golden Globe nomination. She died from complications of diabetes at the age of 78. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. A grim skipping rope rhyme inspired by the life of accused murderess Lizzie Borden. We're in Oak Grove Cemetery in Fall River, Massachusetts, where Lizzie Borden is buried alongside her father and stepmother, victims of a brutal axe murder in 1892. Lizzie would be the main suspect in the highly publicized case. Though eventually acquitted, the murders would follow her the rest of her life, and no one else was ever charged. Borden and her association with the murders have remained a topic of interest in popular culture all these years later, with films and other media being made about the incident. In Lawrence, Massachusetts is Bellevue Cemetery. Here is Thelma Todd, an actress known as the Ice Cream Blonde. She appeared in over 100 films in her career, most notably comedies like the Charlie Chase shorts, and films with the Marx Brothers, including Monkey Business and Horse Feathers. She also co-starred with Buster Keaton and Jimmy Durante in Speak Easily. Thelma died in 1935 under controversial and mysterious circumstances. She was found dead in her car, apparently of carbon monoxide poisoning. Theories quickly spread and hold to this day that she was murdered. But a grand jury found no evidence of murder, and her cause of death was listed as accidental. Thelma was cremated, her ashes placed in her mother's casket before burial here. With summer just around the corner, who doesn't dream of a Hawaiian vacation? The beaches, the music, the food, and of course, the fresh pineapple. Here at Makawao Cemetery on the island of Maui is a man who has become synonymous with pineapple, James Dole. He was known in his life as the Pineapple King for establishing the pineapple industry in Hawaii. In 1899, he arrived in Hawaii and purchased a 64-acre homestead where he began experimenting with crops. He settled on pineapple, founding the Hawaiian Pineapple Company in 1901, which would eventually become Dole Food Company. It is now the largest producer of fruit and vegetables in the world. Let's head over now to Maui's Veterans Cemetery. Here is the grave of Richard Denning. He was an actor known for roles in sci-fi and horror movies of the 40s and 50s, including Creature from the Black Lagoon. He also appeared in An Affair to Remember and played the governor on Hawaii Five-0. On radio, Denning performed with Lucille Ball on the program My Favorite Husband, which was the precursor to I Love Lucy. Richard was married to actress Evelyn Ankers, one of Hollywood's early scream queens. She was famous for her blood-curdling scream, heard in her roles for B-movie horror classics like The Wolf Man, The Ghost of Frankenstein, Son of Dracula, The Mad Ghoul, and more. She retired from movies in 1950, but made a few TV appearances after that, and one final role alongside her husband in 1960. The most famous grave in New Orleans is found here at St. Louis Cemetery No. 1, the crypt of Marie Laveau. She was a renowned practitioner of voodoo in New Orleans in the 1800s, patrons seeking her out for charms, potions, and magical spells for everything from love to protection. She died in 1881, and to this day, her tomb here is a site of adoration sought out by those still seeking the voodoo queen's magic. Those with a wish they want granted draw an X on the tomb, turn around 3 times, knock on the tomb, and shout out their wish, leaving Marie an offering once fulfilled. Due to this continued vandalism, St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 is now only accessible through guided tours. Also here is the future grave of Nicolas Cage. Don't panic, he's still alive. the actor known for films like Leaving Las Vegas, The Rock, and National Treasure, purchased this pyramid for his eternal home, once that day arrives. The inscription Omnia Ab Uno means everything from one. Heavenly Gates Cemetery is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Here is the crypt of Percy Sledge. He was a renowned R&B, soul, and gospel singer in the 60s and 70s. He had a #1 hit in 1966 with the song When a Man Loves a Woman.
When a man loves a woman.
The song would later be covered by Michael Bolton. Sledge was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2005. He died at the age of 74 from cancer. Let's head to Denver, Colorado, and Fairmount Cemetery. We're in the beautiful mausoleum here at Fairmount. On the main floor in Tier BB is the crypt of Donald Meek. He was a Scottish actor whose career began around the turn of the 20th century on Broadway and in silent film. He's perhaps best remembered for his roles in John Ford's Stagecoach and in the Frank Capra film You Can't Take It With You. He died of leukemia at the age of 68. Wheat Ridge is northwest of Denver. This is Mount Olivet Cemetery. Here we find legendary astronaut Jack Swigert, one of only 24 astronauts to have flown to the moon. In 1970, he was assigned as command module pilot for the Apollo 13 moon mission. The lunar landing attempt was aborted after the rupture of an oxygen tank. It was Swigert who made that now infamous "Houston, we've had a problem" pronouncement. The crew then traveled around the moon and returned safely to Earth. After NASA, Swigert was elected to Congress in Colorado, but died from complications of cancer at the age of 51, just 7 days before beginning his congressional term. He was portrayed by Kevin Bacon in the film Apollo 13. We'll head to Calvary Cemetery in Concord, New Hampshire to find another intrepid soul who reached for the stars. Krista McAuliffe was a teacher in New Hampshire who was selected among 11,000 applicants for the NASA Teacher in Space program. She was to be the first teacher and first private civilian in space. On January 28, 1986, she boarded the Space Shuttle Challenger with 6 other crew members. 73 seconds after takeoff, the shuttle exploded and broke apart, killing all on board. McAuliffe was 37. To honor her legacy of teaching and inspiring children, dozens of schools around the nation have been named in her honor. Washington Memory Gardens is in Homewood, Illinois. Heading to the mausoleums, we find the crypt of legendary funny man, Bernie Mac. He gained popularity as a stand-up comedian, featured alongside other greats in the original Kings of Comedy in 2000. In 2001, he landed his own sitcom, The Bernie Mac Show, which ran for 5 seasons and landed him 2 Emmy and Golden Globe nominations. He's also remembered for his roles in films from Guess Who to Ocean's 11. He was just 51 when he died from complications of pneumonia. To Alsip, Illinois now, and Holy Sepulchre Cemetery. This is the grave of Helen Morgan. She was a singer and actress known as the original Torch Singer. Making a splash on stage in the 20s, Helen is perhaps best remembered for her role in the 1927 musical Showboat, as well as both the 1929 and 1936 film adaptations. Other notable performances include the 1929 musical Sweet Adeline. Years of alcohol abuse took their toll, and she collapsed on stage during a performance of George White's Scandals. She died of cirrhosis at just 41. A film was made about her life in 1957, starring Anne Blythe as Helen. Heading to Section 19 here at Holy Sepulchre, we find another musician, John Panazzo. He was a drummer and founding member of the rock band Styx. The band that would eventually become Styx was formed in the early 60s with his twin brother Chuck and neighbor Dennis DeYoung. They launched to stardom in the 70s and 80s with hits like Lady, Mr. Roboto, and Come Sail Away.
Come sail away, come sail away, come sail away with me, lads.
Panazzo too suffered the consequences of excessive drinking, dying of cirrhosis at the age of 47. Chicago is our last Illinois stop. This is Oakwoods Cemetery. Here is the grave of legendary track and field Olympian Jesse Owens. The 1936 Berlin Olympics were Nazism's unveiling to the world, a platform for Hitler to legitimize his government and showcase his ideals of Aryan supremacy. Well, Jesse Owens, a black athlete from Alabama, put that notion to rest real fast. Really, really fast. Embarrassing Hitler on his own turf by becoming the hero of the games. He won gold in the 100 meters, 200 meters, long jump, and 4x100. He was not personally greeted by Hitler for his victories. Then again, neither was he invited to the White House to be greeted by the president. America still had a long way to go before seeing blacks as equal citizens. Owens was even forced to enter the back door and take the freight elevator to arrive at an event honoring him. Today, Owens is considered one of the greatest and most influential athletes of the 20th century, and would eventually be awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom and the Congressional Medal of Honor. There's even now a street named after him in Berlin. We're in Sioux Falls, South Dakota now, and Woodlawn Cemetery. This is where we find the final resting place of Joan Tabor. She was an actress who made guest appearances on many of the great television shows in the 50s and 60s, including Mike Hammer, Perry Mason, and The Red Skelton Hour. She can also be seen in the feature film The Teenage Millionaire. Joan died at the age of 36 from an accidental overdose, not of narcotics, but of influenza medicine. We're in Wisconsin once again, this time Forest Hill Cemetery in Wisconsin Rapids. Here we find the grave of Grim Natwick, whose real name was Myron. He was an artist and animator, best known as the creator of the cartoon character Betty Boop. She was Fleischer Studios' most popular character, a caricature of jazz-age flappers like Helen Kane and Clara Bow.
I got to learn your song.
If you do me wrong,
I'm gonna do you wrong.
you got to kick the gong to catch along with me.
What you gonna do now?
Gonna do the best I can.
Grimm also worked for Disney, including as the lead animator of the character Snow White. This legend of animation lived to be 100. Oaklawn Cemetery in Southport, Connecticut is where we find another of TV's legendary funny ladies, a girl who could turn the world on with her smile, Mary Tyler Moore. She rose to fame as Laura on The Dick Van Dyke Show from 1961 to 1966. In 1970, she was given her own show, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, which ran for 7 seasons. The show was considered groundbreaking for the era, including its depiction of a single working woman as the central character. The role earned her 3 Emmys.
You're gonna make it after all.
After the show ended, she continued to perform in various TV and film productions, including her Oscar-nominated role in the film Ordinary People. In 2017, Mary died from cardiopulmonary arrest at the age of 80. Also here at Oaklawn is Jason Robards. He was a distinguished actor who won 2 Oscars for his performances in All the President's Men and Julia. Robards can also be seen in one of the greatest westerns ever made, as Cheyenne in Once Upon a Time in the West. On stage, he became known for playing works of Eugene O'Neill. He died of cancer at the age of 78. From Connecticut south to West Virginia, Woodmere Memorial Park is in Huntington. This is where Dagmar is laid to rest. She was one of early television's first female stars, gaining notoriety in the 50s for her dumb blonde persona, seen on shows like Broadway Open House, Milton Berle's Texaco Theater, and The Bob Hope Show. In 1952, she even hosted her own show, Dagmar's Canteen. She died in 2001 at the age of 79. After hitting nearly every state and quite a few countries around the world, we're finally back in sunny California. We're in Northern California at Pleasant Hills Memorial Park, north of San Francisco. This is where Charles Schulz is laid to rest. He was a cartoonist famous for creating the beloved comic strip Peanuts, which featured characters like Charlie Brown, Snoopy, and more. The strip ran from 1950 to 2000, seen in some 2,600 papers in countries around the world. Over the course of his career, Schulz produced nearly 18,000 Peanuts strips in all. Peanuts also achieved considerable success through its television specials, like A Charlie Brown Christmas and It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Charles Schulz is considered one of the most influential cartoonists of all time, and Peanuts, one of the greatest comic strips. The strip ended with his death in 2000. In Sacramento, California is Sierra Hills Memorial Park. This is the grave of Buddy Bear. He began his career as a boxer, called one of the greatest punchers of all time. After boxing, he began appearing in film and TV. His hulking frame made him perfect to play brutes on screen. He played giants in Quo Vadis and the Abbott and Costello film, Jack and the Beanstalk. He also played Atlas, a circus strongman, on The Adventures of Superman. Proceeding southeast, we reach Fresno, California, and Fresno Memorial Gardens. This is where Lolly Vegas is laid to rest. He was a rock musician who in the 1970s founded the Native American rock group Redbone with his brother Pat. They had a hit with their single Come and Get Your Love in 1974. Other hits include The Witch Queen of New Orleans, inspired by Marie Laveau. Vegas died in 2010 from cancer. Belmont Memorial Park is also here in Fresno. Here is Walter Huston, an actor who won an Academy Award for his role in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, a film directed by his son, John Huston. He was nominated an additional 3 times, including for All That Money Can Buy. He died of an aortic aneurysm at the age of 67. He was the grandfather of actress Angelica Huston. In Garden of Pines section is the still temporarily marked grave of Richard Kyle. The actor who stood over 7 feet tall was known for playing larger-than-life characters, including the villainous Jaws in the James Bond films, The Spy Who Loved Me, and Moonraker. He can also be seen as Mr. Larson in Happy Gilmore, and voiced Vlad in Tangled. He died of a heart attack in 2014 at the age of 74. We're in Long Beach now, and one of several forest lawns here in Southern California. Not far from this mosaic is the grave of Nate Dogg. He was a rapper and songwriter. In 1991, he joined with Snoop Dogg and Warren G to form the rap trio 213. He also had a successful solo career and would collaborate with other artists like Tupac and 50 Cent. He was known as King of Hooks for often performing the hooks in songs. He died at just 41 from complications of multiple strokes. There's another forest lawn not far east, in Cypress. This is where Irish-born actor Glenn Quinn is laid to rest. Early in his career, he could be seen alongside John Travolta in the film Shout. Today, he's perhaps best remembered for his role as Becky's husband, Mark, on the TV sitcom Roseanne, and as a half-demon on Angel. In 2002, Quinn died of a heroin overdose at the age of 32. We're in Orange County now, and Loma Vista Memorial Park. If you love jam and roller coasters, then you might just be fans of the Knotts. Walter and Cordelia Knott were farmers who cultivated the boysenberry in Southern California. The family made preserves with the berry, and their small restaurant and pie business grew into what would become Knott's Berry Farm. To entertain waiting crowds, Knott built a ghost town for amusement in 1940, over a decade before Disneyland opened. As the attractions grew, it eventually officially became an amusement park, Knott's Berry Farm, in 1968, now one of the most visited in the nation. Also here at Loma Vista, in Coronita Lawn, is C.S. Forrester. He was a novelist known for his writings about naval warfare, most notably the 12-book Horatio Hornblower series, which depicts a fictional Napoleonic War naval officer. He also wrote The African Queen in 1935, which was made into a movie by John Huston. This magnificent edifice is Christ Cathedral in Garden Grove. In the Cathedral Memorial Gardens is the niche of Thurl Ravenscroft. He was a classically trained opera singer and voice actor known for his deep, rich bass. He was the voice of the Frosted Flakes mascot, Tony the Tiger, for more than 5 decades, known for his catchphrase, He also sang You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch, for How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch.
And if you're a fan of Disneyland, you'll hear his voice all over the place in attractions like the Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean, and the Enchanted Tiki Room. He died from cancer at the age of 91. We're at Westminster Memorial Park here in Orange County. In Section 31, not far from the curb, is the grave of Bradley Nowell. He was a musician, the lead singer and guitar player for the band Sublime. They formed in the late 80s, influenced by punk, ska, and reggae. They achieved major commercial success with the release of their self-titled third album in 1996, which spawned hits like What I Got, Santeria,
I don't practice Santeria. I ain't got no crystal ball.
and Wrong Way.
Straight to this very day was the wrong way.
The album was actually released 2 months after Nowell died of a heroin overdose at the age of 28. Sublime disbanded after his death, but despite not touring or promoting, the album became one of the most popular and influential of the 90s, helping define the Southern California sound of the era. Nowell was cremated, his ashes scattered at his favorite surfing spot. This marker was later placed to memorialize him. Finally, we continue south to Mission San Luis Rey Cemetery in Oceanside. Here we find the grave of the woman called the first child star of silent film, Baby Marie Osborne. The bright-eyed little girl began appearing in films in 1914 at the tender age of 3, and would make dozens of films in the silent era. By her adulthood, her roles had been reduced to bit parts and extras mainly. Later in life, she found a new career in Hollywood, working in wardrobe and costumes, including on the films Cleopatra and The Godfather Part 2. Baby Marie lived to be 99, one of the last surviving members of the silent era. And that concludes our tour and our viewers special. A huge thank you again to all who submitted videos. Apologies if we didn't get to your video, it would have been impossible to include everyone. I just hope you all found this series as entertaining and informative as I did. Thanks for watching.